Okay, so welcome to this class. Now we want to start with ISO 27001. Now, when we talk about ISO framework itself, what is the framework itself? Now, previously we talked about framework being a structured guideline. Actually, who remembers what a framework is? What is a framework? Hey, Amanda, you want to give it a try?
Is it like a set of rules or guidelines that helps an organization achieve a specific goal?
Yeah. So structured guidelines that helps us to be able to guard our system or safeguard our system. And so ISO is one of those guidelines. Now, ISO is a framework that is being designed or that is being implemented by, we call them ISMS, Information Security Management System. Now, the Information Security Management System is a set of rules that company needs to be able to establish. And so for you to be able to be in line with or to be able to be in compliance with what the ISMS is requiring of us, that is where the ISO system comes in. Does that make sense? That's where the ISO framework comes in. Now, there are three things that you need to be able to attain when it comes to ISMS. The first is to be able to, one, the goal of the framework of ISMS is to be able to, one, help us to be able to identify our stakeholders, their expectations of the company in terms of information security. What does this mean? This means that we are saying that when it comes to ISMS, we want to be able to make sure that in our organization, when it comes to information security, we know who is doing what. We know all the people that are in charge. Two, we want to be able to make sure that we identify what kind of risks exist for this information. And the third one is we want to be able to define the various controls and mitigation methods to meet the identified expectations to handle the risks. And that's ISMS. Those are the various goals. Any questions? Okay. Now, after we have attained ISMS goals, we want to move also to the next one. Now, there are some of the goals, but I'm not going to go through all of them. Now, the ISO 27001 framework comes in here. Now, the goal of ISO is also to ensure that the CIA triad is what? It's established, just like every information system. They all deal with CIA triad. And so over here, we say that to make sure that confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And if by now you don't know what the CIA triad is, and then that one is a big problem. That one, but we might have to pause the class and let you come for a refund. Because at this point, yeah, you need to be able to explain what the CIA triad is by this time and to be able to talk about how to ensure the CIA triad by this time. Okay. Douglas, are you with me?
Yeah, Ima, yeah.
Okay. You remember what the CIA triad is and how to ensure it?
Oh, that one is busy, so I mean,
It's, okay, no problem. Now, how does ISMS protect our data? Now, they protect our data, one, by identifying information asset that needs to be protected. Shalom, can you see my screen? Okay, perfect. And please listen to me this very well because ISO is one that you face a lot of, you, especially those in the UK, you get a lot of interviews with ISO. Now, they help us to be able to identify. They also have to be able to identify the risks to those kind of information assets. They help us to be able to create controls to mitigate the risks and protect the information assets. Help us to be able to establish a clear plan of action in the event of a data breach, including individuals responsible for each asset. And they help us to be able to define the process for continually reviewing and improving the ISMS. Now, what does this mean? Now, they say that ISMS is a system. Now, when we talk about a system, or like more like a framework, the ISO framework. Now, what you are saying is that they help us to be able to identify the various information that needs to be protected. Why? In our environment, we want to be able to protect our information. How do we protect those information? We can only protect those information if we know the information that we are processing. But we can only also identify those information if we know the assets that are in the environment. Why? Because it is your information. If I'm processing your information, I'm processing your information on a device. Those devices are what we call assets. Does that make sense to us?
Sorry, Emmanuel, can you just repeat that, please? The devices are the assets. That part.
Now, when we say assets, what are assets? Shalom, I'm working with you, so please. Michael, today I'll come to you. Michael, I'll come to you again. You and Shalom. I don't know why I always pair the two of you. Yeah. When we say you're identifying information assets in an organization, what are the assets? The laptops that are in the company, the software that are in the company, the devices, every device is an asset. So when I come to your house right now, I know you are using a laptop right now. I know you definitely have a mobile phone. I know that maybe you have a TV. I know you have a PlayStation. All those things come together to form what we call a network. But individually, they are assets. Please, does that work? Okay. Now, for us to be able to protect them, we first need to be able to identify all those assets. And so ISMS has given us a way that we can identify our assets. They have also given us, okay, perfect. Let me put it this way. Hopefully that can help. I'm just using that as a hypothetical example. They might be saying that, okay, when you go to Michael's house, every asset that is electronic or every asset that is plugged or that uses electricity is supposed to be part of this. So everything that Michael plugs in his house is supposed to be part of it. The blender that the wife uses to cook, the coffee makers, the fridge, the TVs, all those things become part of the asset. Does that make sense now? And that is what we call scoping. Now, it says that the second thing, any asset or any risk that is identified with this kind of assets. So when we talk about the blender, what are the risks that is involved with the blender? When we talk about the TV, what are some of the risks that is involved with the TV? If there is a little child in the house, you know that, then you can't put your TV on the floor. Because by the time you realize they have fixed something and smash your TV with it. So all those becomes risks that is involved. And that is, so they have provided a way for us to be able to identify those risks. First, identify the assets and that needs to be protected. 2, identify those risks. 3, create control measures on how to protect that asset. Four, establish a clear plan of action in the event that there is a data breach. And also identify individuals responsible for each step. Does that make sense? Okay. Then how do you build compliance with ISMS? And these are interview questions. That's why I'm taking my time. You can see that this is not even part of the slides. And some of these slides that I saw that I decided to share with you. Now, first you need to establish the scope. And you could see the similarity with what we did with GDPR. Always, whenever you want to be able to be in compliance with the framework, the first thing is you need to be able to do what? A scope. Which information assets needs to be protected. Then now you come and identify those risks to those information assets. Design the security controls to be able to mitigate those risks. Implement your controls. Track and measure the control effectiveness. Then you need to be able to conduct internal audit to evaluate and continually improve your ISMS. So what you are saying is that first draw up your boundaries. Okay, we just want to be able to access only the living room of Michael. Okay, if you are going to access the living room of Michael, then let's say that Perez is the one that is coming to do the assessment. Then Perez will say that, okay, Michael, I'm here to be able to assess your system. But before Perez will come, Michael wants to make sure that he's building this ISM. So what he's saying that first he establishes the scope, which information asset that he wants to be able to protect. So he's saying that everything in his living area, meaning that his kitchen is not part. So now we are not going to the blender unless Michael decides actually I have to bring the blender to the living area. But everything in there now, what are we doing? Now he's establishing that okay, he has a TV, maybe he has an electric chandelier, maybe it's air conditioning. All those things is in living area. Those are the things that he's trying to identify. What are the risks that are attached to those?
Emmanuel,
Yes, Perez.
quick question. So
Yeah.
know when you say establish the scope and using Michael for an example, so does he get given a list of the things that he's meant to protect? Like, because when the auditor is coming around, does he know that okay, he's come to check the blender, he's come to check the TV, he's come to check the chandelier, or does he just have to do it based on the environment or the kind of industry he's in?
Yes, based on the environment and kind of industry it's in. And when the auditor comes, Michael is going to let them know the scope. When the auditor is done with the reports, he will identify the scope. Now, let me take you a little bit further. Because this question that you asked is a good question. Now, imagine that we are a third-party risk management and we are trying to work with Michael. Michael brings his ISO certification or brings his auditor's report and he says that, oh, they only assess the living room. But the business that we are doing with Michael has to do with the blender, which is in the kitchen. It wasn't part of the school. So Michael can say that I'm ISO certified, but he's only certified for certain things that is not part of the scope of the things that we are looking at. Does that make sense? Or you are confused?
No, it makes sense.
Okay. So Shalom is saying that, why you say it makes sense? Okay.
No,
you
you
lost
can
me.
go over again.
Yeah, because you lost me when you
Okay.
added the blender in. Because the question was, is there a list, right? that Michael will have to go by, or was that I don't yeah.
No, the question was that he was trying to determine the scope. That is he going to be giving a list of where he has to do, of what he needs to include in the scope? Is that present at the question you were asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the things that he needs to look out for.
That
So,
he
for
needs to
example,
look
if he's
out
dealing in the
for.
kitchen,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I'm saying that Michael can decide that he's only doing his scoping for his living room.
Okay.
If he does his scoping for his living room, meaning that the report has to contain only things in the living room.
Mm-hmm.
If he has a report or auditor's report of things in the living room, and all of a sudden, Michael wants to work with Amanda. Amanda says, "Hey, bring your ISO reports. Let me see." He brings his ISO certification. She reviews the reports. Then Amanda finds out that, oh, Michael, your ISO certification you're talking about is only in the living room. But the business Amanda is trying to do with Michael has to do with something that is in the kitchen. That is a blender.
Okay.
Meaning that it has 4 hours of scope.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to be able to establish your scope. They already have a defined way they want you to identify your assets. That is why we are counting on them, because they have a process of doing that.
Mm.
So they will have those process for you on, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. But you also have to customize it to fit your environment. Not everything that they are asking you that you have in your environment. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then you need to be able to identify the risks to the information assets. Then now you come and design your security controls. Until you know the risks, you don't know the controls that you are supposed to put in place. So after you know the risks and you know the controls that you have to put in place, that somebody can enter into your house. Okay, I need a door. Somebody can also pass your backyard. Oh yeah, then I need this. I need to do an MFA. I need to do this. All those things. Then you need to implement your controls. Remember, designing your controls and implementing your controls is 2 different things. Designing is like you are planning your controls. Implementing is that you are putting it in place. Rama, please, are you with me or I've lost you? Okay,
I'm with you.
perfect. Then after you have implemented your controls, your next thing is to be able to track and measure your control effectiveness. When we say track and measure control effectiveness, we are saying that assess your controls. And so that's same assessment method that you go through as an auditor. That is the same method you're going to go through. But this time you are doing what? Tracking and measuring your control effectiveness. What is control effectiveness? Anybody remembers from the previous class we did? Gabby, or you were not in that class? I think you missed one of those classes. I don't know whether that's one you missed. The control effectiveness. Think about it.
I can't remember the actual terms, but was it the ones that were opposite meanings? That it wasn't meant to. I can't remember.
No, that was qualified opinion and
Yeah.
unqualified opinion.
How well the controls are working?
How well the controls are working. Yes. That is control effectiveness. So when we say that a control is effective, yeah. So the control design is the design of the control effectiveness, how well are our controls working? Does that make sense to us? Because you need to design them before you can be able to put in place. And after you have put in place, you need to know how well are your controls working. We talk about that in our SOC 2, and that was a good one. Now, the next step is you need to conduct internal audit to evaluate the continually improve your ISMS. Any questions, please? Any questions? I want you to be able to have a better understanding of this. Now, we have gone through the process that you go through. Now, the implementation of ISO is also another question that you get asked a lot. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go through the various clauses under the ISO. Then afterwards, we can do how do we implement ISO. Then maybe after that, we'll see where the Lord leads us. Now, ISO has so many different clauses. The clauses in ISO is like we're saying control families. Does that make sense? The control families are what we call the clauses. So when you come to ISO, they have a few clauses here that I want to run through with us. I think that I'm not sharing my screen. Why am I giving myself a thumbs up? Okay. Okay. Now, the first one that we want to talk about, we call the clause 4. Now, when you pick at the ISO standard, the clause 4 talks about the context of an organization. When we say the context of an organization, it's talking about understanding what the organization does. What are the needs and expectations of interested third parties? The scope of ISMS when it comes to that third party. So the ISMS policy will tell you that, hey, your organization shall establish, implement, and maintain continually the ISMS policy. And those policies are what we talked about. Does that make sense? And so first, clause 4 is saying that the context. So ISMS has given us, so you see that when you go into the controls, there are various steps under the controls. And it's labeling how you need to be able to give us a context of your organization. What are the goals and objectives? What are their security goals? What are the risks that are involved? All those things comes under here. Then clause 5 talks about leadership. That top management must demonstrate leadership and commitment to the ISMS policy or standard. How? By assigning various security roles and responsibilities and authorizing them. Then clause 6 talks about planning. What is planning? When we talk about planning, the ISMS is saying that outline the process to be able to identify, analyze, and plan to treat information risks and clarify the objectives of the information security. And it says that because for you to be able to handle risks, you need to know your goals of the objectives. If you remember when we started, we talked about what? Ad hoc. There were 3 things that we talked about of the approach that every organization has to take to handle risks. Compliance-based, risk-based, and ad hoc. Hey, oh, you have forgotten. Edwin is checking the notes whether he covered it. Yes, you covered it. Yeah, you covered it. We talked about compliance base, where we realized that we are being in compliance with frameworks, and we use that framework to be able to identify and so manage our risks. Then we talk about risk base, where we say that we just try to determine the risk that is involved in the environment and address the risks as a way of protecting our environment. And we have ad hoc as and when anything comes up. Okay. Please don't forget. You see, these things that we are learning now, you see that it's coming, they are all coming together. Yeah. Then clause 7 talks about support. That is where adequate competent resources must be signed, awareness raised, documentation prepared, and controlled. Then we talk about clause 8, operations, additional details that must be signed, awareness that needs to be raised, prepared, and controlled. No, clause 8, support is the one I'm talking about. Support has to do with the resources that you need to be able to provide. Resources, personnel that you are working with. Then operations has to do with additional details about selling and assessing and treating information risks. That is, are you going by any compliance framework? Are you being audited? Documenting all those things. Are you being certified? That's where the operations comes in. Then the 9 is performance evaluation. Now, performance evaluation talks about auditing your system, monitoring, measuring, analyzing, and reviewing your information security controls, just to make sure that the controls are working effectively, as we talked about. Then 10, improvement. Always remember, we are not satisfied with what we have. We always want to be able to improve. So we are always looking at how to be able to improve our system, to improve our security measures, address findings that came out during the audit, review them, and make sure that we are doing continually refinement to be able to meet the standard of ISMS. Any questions, please?
Emmanuel, are there more clauses, or these are the main ones?
These are the main ones. The other ones is the annex.
Okay. Do they have sub clauses under each clause?
Yes.
Okay.
But these are like the main one. Then there are other ones that all matches or that all falls under the main clause.
Yeah, Emmanuel, does it mean that it states that clauses from 4 to 10? Does it mean that you have 1 to 4?
No. I don't understand your question.
I mean, it says that information security management clauses 4 to 10. So I was just assuming that does it start from 1 to 10 or yes, 4 to 10?
No, 4 to 10.
Oh, okay.
That's why I'm saying that they are annexed. So they call the annex control. That also counts before. And they all form part of it. Now, let's go through the implementation process of the ISO. Then I can touch on a few things, then we can move on. Now, the first one I want to talk about is in any information system process, first thing is always your scoping. Now, when we say scoping and planning, what are you? First, you need to be able to identify who are the various key stakeholders that you're going to be working with. Your key stakeholders, very important. Then now you develop a communication plan. Define your priorities, your timelines, and the scope that you want to be able to work. And we talked about scope as well, the boundaries. Now, after you have done that, you want to know what you have in your system currently. So we say that the current state assessment. What is your current state assessment? Your current state assessment has to talk about the initial gap assessment or the internal audit that you need to do. Remember, gap assessment, risk assessment, all those, they are the same thing. All you are trying to see is that you are being matched by, or you are being measured by certain controls. So you want to be able to make sure that you are in line with those controls. So when we talk about gap assessment, that's what we mean. A gap assessment means that you are being measured by certain controls. So you want to be able to look at the gaps. What do I have in my system? And what is it that I don't have? And that is the gap that we are talking about. Does that make sense? Okay. Then the second one I want to talk about is you need to be able to provide detailed recommendations. Checklist for all the action items. Validate the plan is actionable and right size. So you go for an interview and they are asking you that, hey, have you implemented an ISM before? Yeah, I've done it before. How do you do it? I started by my scoping and planning, where we decide who our project manager is going to be, define our priorities, our timelines, and our communication plan. After we that, we didn't need to do a gap analysis or a gap assessment. Now, during our gap assessments, we provided detailed recommendations on the various gaps that we need to be, on the various controls that we need to be able to address, develop the checklist for all the action items. Then we validated our plan and made sure that it's actionable in the right size. And now we develop what we call the remediation roadmap. When we say remediation roadmap, how do you understand it? Anyone in 1 minute, please. Our time is fast spent. If those, we'll go through the frameworks today, then we'll get another time and do. Yeah, Douglas, go ahead. Remediation plan. Remediation.
I think you develop a way of solving or getting a solution to, the problem we have already
That's
identified.
all. That's all. So you need to develop a remediation roadmap. What a remediation roadmap? So over here, we see the program implementation. Developing strategic plan for the gap remediation, including budget and resources. Then validate the plan is actionable and right size. When we go to the risk management framework, what do you think? We treated this as a remediation roadmap. Do you remember what the name is given? A remediation roadmap is like a poem. Yeah, plan of action and milestone. What does your plan of action and milestone contain? Your controls, the risks, the vulnerabilities, the resources that you need to be able to identify, the people that needs to be your point of contact. That's what he's talking about here. And the various milestones. Then now we go to the program implementation. Now, when we talk about the program implementation, first we are saying that you need to be able to implement your controls. You need to be able to update your policy and procedures. Executive risk assessment, you need to establish your governance structure, then your strategic planning cadence. And that is the implementation of controls or the program implementation. And that is how you go about to be able to implement an ISO certification or program. So I have this chart here of some of the mandatory required things that you need to be able to do, the access controls, because those are the things that the auditors will be looking out for when they come for you to be certified. They want to make sure that you have these control families also in place, and these are the various control families.
No, so these are what should fall under the scope.
So these are the various control families of the controls that you need to be able to implement. So they call them control, the various domains. And I'll talk about it very shortly. We are getting there in our next 2 slides. Now, they call something, let me talk about the scope, the domains. So these are the domains. It used to be 14 domains, but it looks like they have even updated it. Now, these domains that they are talking about, they are 14. Each of these domains are addressing one aspect of information security. So access control, communication security, cryptography, human resources, physical environmental. So you can see that it's similar to the NIST 853. Now, when we talk about information security, let me quickly run through and to be able to explain it to us shortly. Now, information security talks about, when it comes to ISO, it says that you need to be able to establish a framework for your information security policy and procedure. When we talk about organization of information security, it says that you need to be able to define the roles and responsibilities within the organization that is related to information security. Human resources. Now, you need to be able to address the security aspect of personnel, including onboarding, training, and offboarding. You need to be able to make sure that you are addressing all those things. Then it talks about asset management. Now, asset management talks about the fact that you need to focus on identifying and classifying and protecting of your information assets, as we talked about using Michael as an example. Then access control the various assets that are coming into your organization. Then we have cryptography. Now, have I talked about cryptography in this class before?
No, I don't remember. Don't remember you mentioning.
Okay. Now, whenever you hear cryptography, it's talking about encryption.
Yeah.
Anytime you hear cryptography, it's talking about encryption. It's talking about how do you protect your assets or deal with the use of cryptographic techniques to protect your assets. And the cryptographic techniques are encryption and hashing and those kind of things. So whenever you hear cryptography, please don't forget. There's a NIST publication that we used to do that. I think it's NIST 860-2. If I remember well, please don't forget. I was actually in an interview before. NIST 860-. No. Is it 160-2 or I'll validate it for you. I was in an interview and they was asked that question and I didn't know it. And I started thinking, is it going to be 853? As I'm doing that, I'm using my Google search. So the guy was like, if you don't know, it's fine. I said, oh, I think it's 853 because that's where all the controls are, because I was trying to be smart. So then I Googled it and I saw the answer. I said, nah. And then I went back. I'm like, can I change my answer? Oh, man. God have mercy. By God's grace, I was able to get a job. But, but I was not supposed to do that. You don't know. You don't go back and say, can I change my answer? Unless maybe you're able to create that rapport and you feel like, yeah, then you can be able to go about it. But nowadays, I don't even do interviews like that. But I'll talk to you about interviews shortly. So, communication security. Communication security talks about addressing the various security that has to do with data transfer or data that is transmitted over the network. Now, system acquisition, we are talking about how do we develop and maintain, focus on the system development now, SDLC of our information assets. Supplier relationship. Supplier relationship is just third-party management or third-party relationship. Information security, incident management or incident management. How do we handle incidents that happen? Then we have the compliance that has to do ensuring that we are in compliance with relevant legal and regulatory bodies. And so those are the controls. They call them the domain. They are 14 domain under the ISO 27001. Any questions, please?
Do we need to know any other standard besides ISO 27001? I know that's like the most common one.
ISO is a common one, but for you, you need to know your list. Yeah, for you, you don't, your risk management framework, you can't go without it. That should be your main one. But when it comes to those in the UK, your first framework is supposed to be ISO. And I'm going to send you a few documents that will give you more information about it and some videos that you can watch to be able to give you more information also about it. Now, there is a document called Statement of Applicability. This is how a statement of applicability looks like. You can't do ISO interview without you being asked about this. Statement of applicability. When we say statement of applicability, what does it mean? What it means is that it is a document that will outline your control objectives and the various controls that you need or that are applicable to your organization and why they are applicable to your organization. So like we talked about Michael's example. Now the statement of applicability will go to Michael's living room. It will document all the things that are there. Why is it applicable? So from Perez's question that he was asking me about, how do you know the statement of applicability is going to give you all those things. Does that make sense to us? Yeah. That's it. It will give you everything that you need to know about your system, why those things apply, all those things you need to document it. So when the auditor comes, that's the first document that he takes. After he has gotten your statement of applicability, everything else is fine. Any questions, please? Any questions? Now, ISMS doesn't develop only one framework. They have about two. They have a couple of them, not two. They have ISO 27001, 27002, 9001. All of them does different things. But for us, we are focused on ISO 27001. But there are common interview questions that you are going to be facing during the interviews. And one of them is, what is the difference between ISO 27001 and 27002? 27001 is a standard that defines how to build an information security management system. (27002) is a set of guidelines and techniques for implementing security controls. So 27001 tells you about how to be able to build a house. 27002 tells you about how to be able to protect your house or what controls to put in place to protect your house. Does that make sense?
Emmanuel, can you please give us the first definition again?
First definition, ISO 27001 defines how to build an information security management system, ISMS. ISO 27002 tells us about how it's a set of guidelines and techniques for implementing security controls.
Thank you.
You're welcome. When do we use them? ISO 27001, you use it when you need to design and build a compliance ISMS system, but you use a 27002 when you are ready to implement specific security controls to protect your system.
Sorry, can you repeat that for me, please, Emmanuel?
27001 is used when you want to be able to build an ISMS system. 27002 is used when you want to be able to build security controls and implement security controls. Any questions, please? How many controls are in ISO? About 114 controls. Then don't forget that we have the Annex A, which I talked about when you were asking me about it. Any questions, please? And there are going to be a detailed video of all these ISO and everything on the website. So I'm sure when it gets uploaded, you'll be able to have access to all of them where I go through the whole slides. Now, we want to start our interview preparation. So I'm going to stop the recording here.